Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you with all the top news stories from around the globe. Let's get started with our big focus. It's an agreement that carries great strategic significance for India. Today, India signed an agreement with Iran to manage the southeastern Iranian port of Chabahar for the next 10 years. Indian Shipping Minister Sarbanand Sonowal travelled to Iran to sign the crucial agreement. India has been developing a part of the port in Chabahar, which is located on Iran's southeastern coast along the Gulf of Oman, as a way to transport goods to Iran. Afghanistan and Central Asian countries that avoid the port of Karachi in Pakistan. US sanctions on Iran, however, have slowed down the port's development. Let's understand the geostrategic location and significance of this port and its brief history. Chabahar is a deep water port located in the Sistan-Baluchistan province of Iran. It's the closest Iranian port to India and is located in the open sea, providing easy and secure access for large cargo ships. During the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Iran in May 2016, a trilateral agreement to establish the International Transport and Transit Corridor, or the Chabahar Agreement, was signed by India, Iran and Afghanistan, all three countries in fact. India is participating in the development of the first phase of the Shahid Beheshti terminal at the Chabahar port in cooperation with the government of Iran. India has so far supplied 6 mobile harbour cranes of 140 tons and 100 tons capacity and other equipment worth $25 million. The Indian government, India Ports Global Limited, through its wholly owned subsidiary, India Ports Global Chabahar Free Zone, took over the operations of the Chabahar port on the 24th of December 2018. Since then, it has handled traffic of more than 90,000 TEUs of container traffic and more than 8.4 MMT of bulk and general cargo. The port has also facilitated the supply of humanitarian assistance, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Till date, a total of 2.5 million tons of wheat and 2,000 tons of pulses have been transshipped from India to Afghanistan through Chabahar port. In 2021, India supplied 4,000 litres of environment-friendly pesticide, Malthion, to Iran to fight locust menace through the port. In August 2023, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with President Ibrahim Raisi of Iran in Johannesburg on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Both leaders discussed the pending long-term contract on Chabahar and gave a clear political direction to finalize and sign the long-term contract. Finally, today, during his visit to Tehran, the Minister of Shipping, Ports and Waterways, Sarbanand Sonowal, witnessed the signing of the new 10-year contract between India Ports Global Limited and Ports and Maritime Organization of Iran. Under the contract, IPGL will commit to further equip and operate the port for the duration of the contract. At the end of the 10-year period, both sides would further extend their cooperation. IPGL will invest approximately $120 million in equipping the port. India has also offered an Indian rupee credit window equivalent to $250 million for mutually identified projects aimed at improving Chabahar-related infrastructure. The Chabahar port has provided much needed sea access to the landlocked countries of the region, including Afghanistan, and emerged as a commercial transit hub for the region. It's a more economical and stable route for landlocked countries of the region to reach India and the global market. With the operationalization of India's long-term investment in Chabahar, this port is likely to become an important hub for connecting the landlocked countries of Central Asia and Afghanistan with India's booming economy. The long-term agreement, which will be valid as we said for 10 years and will be extended automatically, was being negotiated by the two sides over the past 3 years and had been primarily held up by differences over a clause related to arbitration. It will replace an initial pact inked in 2016 that covered India's operations at Shahid Beheshti terminal of Chabahar port and has been renewed on an annual basis. Minister Sarbanand Sonowal's visit to Tehran amid India's general election emphasizes the importance attached by New Delhi to the port and its place in ambitious plans to forge greater connectivity with Iran, Afghanistan and the landlocked Central Asian states. The move also comes at a time when China has been showing greater interest in investments in ports and other coastal infrastructure in Iran, with Tehran pressing Beijing to take up the development of other terminals at Chabahar port. Both India and Iran see Chabahar as a hub for the international north-south transport corridor that will allow shipping companies to use an alternative route that bypasses the sensitive and busy Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. Since IPGL began operations at Shahid Beheshti terminal in late 2018, it has handled more than 4.8 million tons of bulk cargo, including transshipments from Australia, Bangladesh, Brazil, Germany, Russia and the United Arab Emirates. As we mentioned, India took up development of Shahid Beheshti terminal under a tripartite agreement on Chabahar signed with both Iran and Afghanistan in May of 2016. Afghanistan is effectively no longer part of the arrangements since the takeover of the country by the Taliban in 2021, though Chabahar Port has benefited from a US waiver on sanctions imposed on Iran. India pledged it would invest $85 million in the terminal and has so far supplied cranes and other equipment worth $24 million US. And remember, through this agreement, India is getting ready to counter both China and Pakistan by tying up with Iran. This is the first time India will be managing a port overseas. So what exactly is the significance of the Chabahar port? Can it be India's answer to Pakistan's Gwadar port and China's Belt and Road Initiative? The Chabahar port is viewed as a crucial cog in linking India to Afghanistan, Central Asia and the larger Eurasian region. India wants the port to be a key hub in the international north-south transport corridor. The INCTC connects India and Russia via Iran. It's a 7,200-kilometer multi-mode transport project for moving freight among India, Iran, Afghanistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia and Europe. The INSTC gained importance amid the conflict in Ukraine. New Delhi has been pushing both the INSTC and the Chabahar port to boost regional connectivity. India and Iran first began discussing the port back in 2003. It took India another decade to finally invest $100 million in the port. The vital step on the port was finally taken in 2016 during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Iran. India at the time also committed to financing the development of the Shahid Beheshti terminal to the tune of $85 million. In 2018, the then Iranian President Hassan Rouhani had expounded on increasing India's involvement in the port. This port is important because of its prime location on the Gulf of Oman, at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. The Chabahar port is Iran's only deep-sea port with direct access to the ocean. Significantly, it's also exempt from US sanctions, which makes it an attractive prospect not just for India but other countries as well. Central Asian nations such as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have also articulated their willingness to use Chabahar to get their goods into the Indian Ocean region and the Indian market. It will also help Indian traders and investors get access to Central Asia. The Chabahar port allows India to cut the time it takes to send goods to Central Asia by 1/3. The port will boost India's import of iron ore, sugar and rice. It also gives India access by road to 4 Afghan cities of Herat, Kandahar, Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif. It stands to reason that better connectivity with Afghanistan could thus lead to improved diplomatic ties between the two countries. The port can also be used as a pushing-off point from which humanitarian operations can be conducted. The development comes at a time when the crisis in West Asia is reaching a fever pitch. Hamas's attack on Israel and the latter's response has led to key trade routes being disrupted and has shone a light on the need to improve regional connectivity. But arguably, the port's most important feature is serving as India's counter to Pakistan's Gwadar port and China's Belt and Road Initiative. Using the Chabahar port allows India to cut Pakistan out of the loop while sending its goods directly to Afghanistan. The Diplomat magazine wrote in a piece, and I quote, "India has been severely hindered in establishing a land-based trading with countries to its west, as virtually all of these routes would have to go through Pakistan, India's arch rival. Establishing a sea-based trade route to Western and Central Asia via Chabahar port would allow India to bypass Pakistan and establish trade networks with the countries in these regions." The port became even more significant for India after China included the Gwadar port as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. The port could also be of use to India if China stations its vessels in Gwadar port, which is less than 400 kilometers away by road and 100 kilometers by sea. The Chabahar port also serves India's goal of countering China's attempts to expand its influence in the Indian Ocean. Many experts have noted how New Delhi and Tehran coming closer together could prove a counterweight to China and Pakistan's all-weather friendship. They argue India's involvement with Chabahar Port serves as a key strategy to buttress its superpower status by widening its regional market presence and using an Indo-Iranian alliance to buffer China and particularly China-Pakistan cooperation. While India's development of Chabahar Port could be impacted by deteriorating US-Iran ties, especially if Donald Trump returns to the White House, opportunities still remain.
Today is a big day in this journey we have jointly undertaken to develop Chabahar Port as a primary hub of regional connectivity. The signature of the long-term contract will provide a positive momentum and will be a confidence boosters to the traders and business persons, not just in Iran and India, but the wider region as a whole. I am sure that the Indian operator IPGL will work to the best of its capacity and will continue to enjoy cooperation of ports and maritime organization of Iran.
Time for a quick break here on Global Lens. There's plenty more on the other side. Stay with us.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. In a move that took many Kremlin watchers by surprise, Russian President Vladimir Putin has removed his long-standing ally Sergei Shoigu as the country's defense minister. The 68-year-old had been in the role since 2012 and will now be replaced by Deputy Prime Minister Andrei Belousov, an economist with little military experience. Shoigu is being appointed as Secretary of Russia's Security Council. The Kremlin has said the defense ministry needed to stay innovative. Reshuffles in Russia don't happen very often, so this is a big moment at the top of Russian politics. But Vladimir Putin remains the person who ultimately calls the shots. It was his decision to start the war in Ukraine, and all the big decisions are taken by him. The appointment of Belousov as defense minister has astonished many given his previous experience. But analysts suggest President Putin is seeking to align the Russian economy more closely with the war effort. The decision to put an economist in charge of the defense ministry reflects the changing priorities of the Kremlin and the huge amounts of money the Russian authorities are now pouring into the war with Ukraine and Russia's need to boost efficiency in the armed forces. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the proposed appointment of a civilian shows the role of the defense minister calls for innovation. He said Russia was becoming more like the Soviet Union in the mid-1980s when a high proportion of GDP went on military spending. As a result, it was necessary to make sure that military expenditure was better integrated into Russia's overall economy. He added, the one who's more open to innovations is the one who will be victorious on the battlefield. In recent months, there had been rumors that Shoigu's position was growing weaker and that he could lose his job. In the month of April, one of his deputies, Timur Ivanov, was arrested on corruption charges in a rare move against such a senior official. And Russia's campaign in Ukraine was meant to last a few weeks at most. Instead, it's now in its third year and has been plagued by military setbacks and big losses, both in terms of men and material. Although Shoigu will remain in a powerful role as Secretary of the Security Council of Russia, the move appears to be a demotion for him. It's not yet clear what will happen to the Council's current head, Nikolai Patrushev. Shoigu has close links with President Putin, often taking him on fishing trips in his native Siberia. He was given the defense portfolio despite having no military background, which rankled with some of his top brass. A civil engineer by profession, Shoigu rose to prominence as head of the Emergencies and Disaster Relief Ministry in the 1990s. In 2023, Shoigu became embroiled in a public feud with Wagner mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin over Russia's conduct of the war. Prigozhin, who led a short-lived mutiny against Moscow, accused Shoigu of being a dirtbag and an elderly clown in audio messages that went viral. The mercenary chief died in a plane crash while flying from St. Petersburg to Moscow in August 2023. The Kremlin denied it was to blame. According to unnamed government officials, Belousov is seen as a hardline defender of the state who believes that Russia is encircled by enemies. Like President Putin, he is close to the Russian Orthodox Church. He is said to be a martial arts enthusiast, as is President Putin, who practiced karate and the Russian combat sport sambo in his youth. Before becoming Deputy Prime Minister, he worked for several years as an aide to Putin and was reportedly the only member of the president's economic entourage to support the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Putin was sworn in as president for a record fifth time just last week after winning Russia's recent election with 87% of the vote without facing any credible opponents. He has led Russia since May 2000.
Vladimir Putin tapped a civilian economist as his surprise new defense minister on Sunday. It's an attempt by the Russian president to prepare Russia for economic war by trying to better utilize the defense budget and harness greater innovation to win in Ukraine. More than 2 years into the conflict, which has cost both sides heavy casualties, Putin proposed Andrei Belousov to replace his long-term ally Sergei Shoigu as defense minister. Belousov is a 65-year-old former deputy prime minister who specializes in economics and has played an important role in overseeing Russia's drone program. He is known to be very close to Putin and shares the Russian leader's vision of rebuilding a strong state. Meanwhile, Putin wants Shoigu to become the secretary of Russia's powerful Security Council. His new job is technically regarded as a step up to his defense ministry role, which ensures continuity and allows him to save face. Shoigu was heavily criticized by Russian military bloggers for a series of retreats the Russian military was forced to make in 2022. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the change made sense because Russia was approaching a situation like the Soviet Union in the mid-1980s, when the military and law enforcement authorities accounted for 7.4% of gross domestic product. Peskov said that meant it was vital to ensure such spending was better integrated into the country's overall economy. It was why Putin now wanted a civilian economist in the defense ministry job, Peskov added. Russia's economists have so far largely ensured economic stability and growth despite the toughest sanctions ever imposed on a major economy. The changes are the most significant Putin has made since launching what he called a special military operation in Ukraine in 2022. They indicate Putin is eager to harness more of Russia's economy for the Ukraine war.
Time for another break here on Global Lens, but don't go anywhere. There's plenty more on the other side, including the latest on the Israel-Hamas war.
Forever, there are simultaneous election of Parliament, Assembly, and municipality and panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment, and the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, If all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday delivered some of the Biden administration's strongest public criticism yet of Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza, saying Israeli tactics have meant a horrible loss of life of innocent civilians, but failed to neutralize Hamas leaders and fighters and could drive a lasting insurgency. In television interviews, Blinken underscored that the United States believes Israeli forces should get out of Gaza, but also is waiting to see credible plans from Israel for security and governance in the territory after the war. Hamas has re-emerged in parts of Gaza, Blinken said, and heavy action by Israeli forces in the southern city of Rafah risks leaving America's closest Mideast ally holding the bag on an enduring insurgency. He said the US has worked with Arab countries and others for weeks on developing credible plans for security, governance, rebuilding in Gaza, but we haven't seen that come from Israel. We need to see that too. Blinken also said as Israel pushes deeper into Rafah in the south, a military operation may have some initial success, but risks terrible harm to the population without solving a problem that both of us want to solve, which is making sure Hamas cannot again govern Gaza. More than 1 million Palestinians have crowded into Rafah in the hope of refuge as Israel's offensive pushed across Gaza. Israel has said the city also hosts 4 battalions of Hamas fighters. Israel's conduct of the war, Blinken said, has put the country on the trajectory potentially to inherit an insurgency with many armed Hamas fighters, or if it leaves a vacuum filled by chaos, filled by anarchy and probably refilled by Hamas. We've been talking to them about a much better way of getting an enduring result, enduring security. Blinken also echoed for the first time publicly by a US official the findings of a new Biden administration report that was submitted to the US Congress on Friday, which said Israel's use of US-provided weapons in Gaza likely violated international humanitarian law. The report also said wartime conditions prevented American officials from determining that for certain in specific airstrikes. Blinken stated when it comes to the use of weapons, concerns about incidents where given the totality of the damage that's been done to children, women, men, it was reasonable to assess that in certain instances Israel acted in ways that are not consistent with international humanitarian law. Blinken cited the horrible loss of life of innocent civilians. Blinken spoke to Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on Sunday, reiterating the long-standing US opposition to what is now the growing Israeli offensive in Rafah, given the toll on civilians there. Blinken urged Gallant to allow humanitarian workers to bring aid into Gaza and distribute it. Israel's offensive into Rafah has shut down one of the 2 main border crossings into the territory for a week, and most operations have stopped at the other one after it was targeted by a Hamas rocket attack. 7 months of fighting and Israeli restrictions on aid deliveries already have led to famine in the north of Gaza. Aid organizations say the now nearly total cut-off of food, medicine and fuel and the disruption from the Rafah offensive have meant that humanitarian operations across Gaza are on the brink of collapse. Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, in a call with his Israeli counterpart, raised concerns about a military ground operation in Rafah and discussed alternative courses of action that would ensure Hamas is defeated everywhere in Gaza. Hanegri confirmed Israel is taking US concerns into account, said the White House. There are increasing tensions between Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about how the war has been conducted, and also domestic tensions about US support for Israel, with protests on US college campuses and many Republican lawmakers saying Biden needs to give Israel whatever it needs. The issue could play a major role in the outcome of November's presidential election in the US. Biden recently said in an interview that his administration would not provide weapons that Israel could use for an all-out assault in Rafah. The exodus of Palestinians from Gaza's last refuge has accelerated as Israeli forces have pushed deeper into the southern city of Rafah. Israel also pounded the territory's devastated north, where some Hamas fighters have regrouped in areas the military said it had cleared months ago. Rafah is considered Hamas's last stronghold. Some 300,000 of the more than 1 million civilians sheltering there have fled the city following evacuation orders from Israel, which says it must invade to dismantle Hamas and return scores of hostages taken from Israel in the 7th October attack that sparked the war. Neighbouring Egypt has issued its strongest objection yet to the Rafah offensive, saying it intends to formally join South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, alleging that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, an accusation that Israel rejects. The Foreign Ministry's statement cited the worsening severity and scope of the Israeli attacks against Palestinian civilians. United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said in a statement that he cannot see how a full-scale invasion of Rafah can be reconciled with international humanitarian law. Gaza has been left without a functioning government, leading to a breakdown in public order and allowing Hamas's armed wing to reconstitute itself even in the hardest hit areas. On Sunday, Hamas touted attacks against Israeli soldiers in Rafah and near Gaza City. Israel has yet to offer a detailed plan for post-war governance in Gaza, saying only that it will maintain open-ended security control over the enclave that houses 2.3 million Palestinians. Internationally mediated talks over a ceasefire and hostage release appear to be at a standstill. Prime Minister Netanyahu has once again vowed to continue fighting until victory in memory of those killed in the war. But in Tel Aviv, hundreds of protesters stood outside military headquarters and raised candles demanding an immediate ceasefire deal to return the hostages. Netanyahu has rejected the post-war plans proposed by the United States for the Palestinian Authority, which administers parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank, to govern Gaza with support from Arab and Muslim countries. Those plans depend on progress towards the creation of a Palestinian state, which Israel's government strictly opposes. The 7th October attack killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and took another 250 hostage. Hamas terrorists still hold about 100 captives and the remains of more than 30. Israel's offensive has killed more than 35,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, according to Gaza's health ministry. Israel says it has killed over 13,000 terrorists without providing any evidence, though. In an exclusive conversation with News9 Deputy Managing Editor Kartikeya Sharma, BJD leader and the man behind Odisha's 5T initiative, V.K. Pandyan, shares his thoughts on the constitution being a poll issue this Lok Sabha. Listen in.
Do you feel that the constitution or democracy is in danger?
No, I would not say that. Not at all. Not at all. Indian constitution and Indian democracy is what should I say? It's so strong. I don't think anybody on earth or anybody in the political system will dare to touch the constitution, or will have the wherewithals to amend the constitution's basic features. And we have a judiciary also. You can't touch the basic features of the constitution. See, this constitution debate is also diverting the core issues of people. How many people in our villages are thinking about whether constitution is getting changed or not?
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए, और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
The football is mother of all games.
It is a team sport.
The leadership attitude is taking the ownership.
It's always a big responsibility to take decisions and the right decisions.
I always question the stereotypical.
And that's why you are in that position.
This and more, streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Can the Trinamool candidate from Baharampur hit the ball out of the park?
50-60 दिन बहुत ज़्यादा बोल रहा हूँ, उससे पहले ही काम दिखने स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे.
Pitted opposite Pathan in Team BJP is Dr. Nirmal Kumar Saha.
The fight is not Adit Chaudhary and Nirmal Saha. The fight between Modi versus Rahul Gandhi.
Yusuf Pathan and Nirmal Saha, two professionals who have switched to politics, are taking on Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary. Can one of the first-time politicians end his winning streak?
This and more, streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I don't think anybody has isolated Ajit Dada Pawar. Ajit Dada has isolated himself.
That led to a lot of bad blood between the ruling partners.
It is not true. You know it very well, who these elements are, who these individuals are. And these are the very reasons why you see a division in the party.
Now this contest between Supriya Sule and Sunetra Pawar is really a proxy war between uncle and nephew, and it's being fought in the family bastion of Baramati.
This and more, streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more, streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get you some of the other big stories that we're tracking. The prosecution's star witness in Donald Trump's Manhattan criminal trial could also be its biggest liability. Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney, has begun to testify against the man he once reverently referred to as the boss. Cohen made the hush money payment at the center of the case, a sum which the prosecution alleges was fraudulently reimbursed by Trump. He could provide essential testimony for prosecutors. But outside the courtroom, on podcasts, television and social media, Cohen has not exactly helped their case. He's mocked Trump on X, calling him Sleepy Donald, and has used a profane nickname referring to the former president. Cohen also has posted memes that appear to show Trump in prison uniform orange, and he joked on TikTok about Trump being incarcerated. Trump 2024, he said during one TikTok stream. More like Trump 20 to 24 years, he added. Cohen's actions went too far for the judge, who on Friday warned prosecutors to tell Cohen to stop commenting on the case. Michael Cohen's rogue behavior, coupled with his very real criminal record, has opened the door for Trump's defense to cast doubts on this crucial player. In 2018, Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to 8 felony counts, including tax offenses, fraud and campaign finance violations. The last charge that we just mentioned stems from the very same hush money payment at the heart of Trump's case. He also pleaded guilty to lying to US Congress, a fact Trump's attorneys have brought up in this trial and during a separate civil case as well. Trump is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records for allegedly reimbursing Cohen for a $130,000 hush money payment he made to adult film star Stormy Daniels, then trying to disguise records of the payment as legal expenses. Daniels has alleged that she had sex with Donald Trump in 2006. Trump has pleaded not guilty to the charges and denied any sexual encounter with Daniels. Cohen once described himself as Donald Trump's spokesman, thug, pit bull and lawless lawyer. But this week, he has a new role. He is the star witness for prosecutors trying to prove Trump illegally falsified business records after paying off adult film actress Stormy Daniels as part of an alleged election interference scheme in 2016. Michael Cohen's testimony is said to be the critical moment of the hush money trial that could make Trump the first former president of the United States to be convicted of a crime. His appearance will mark the zenith of a bitter personal feud between two brash New Yorkers obsessed with betrayal and revenge. And it marks one of the most lurid twists yet in the presumptive Republican nominee's legal morass that's entwined with the 2024 election. Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, wrote in his autobiography that he craved reflected influence and notoriety from Trump, so he adopted the real estate magnate's methods, including bullying, lying and mocking the rule of law, to serve him. He once vowed to take a bullet for his boss. But his testimony will be his latest attempt to atone for this Faustian pact after he paid the price, including with a spell in prison for his years as a kingpin in Trump's orbit. In many ways, Michael Cohen is the mirror image of Trump. A colorful braggart and social media provocateur who craved power and riches and was prepared to pay any price and to intimidate anyone to get them. Cohen, who worked for the Trump Organization, cleaning up the mess from the family's personal scandals and busted business deals, facilitated the $130,000 hush money payment to Daniels, he says, on the orders of his boss. Trump has denied having an affair with Daniels, whose testimony last week about their alleged liaison at Lake Tahoe in 2006 seemed excruciating for the former president. He has pleaded not guilty in this case and to 3 other criminal indictments. Michael Cohen's value as a witness is that he was involved in every aspect of Trump's business and personal life, knew all his secrets, and was allegedly an accessory in his efforts to break the law and thwart accountability. In his book, Disloyal, Michael Cohen wrote, "I know where the skeletons are buried because I was the one who buried them." Well, our next story is also from the United States and it's on the same controversial former president who is in the running yet again. Trump is well known for his endless rants against immigrants in the United States and the xenophobia that he routinely displays during his election rallies. However, the daily struggles of immigrants, including Chinese immigrants in the US, is a far cry from the picture that the former president and other Republicans have sought to paint of them as a coordinated group of military-aged men who have come to the US to build an army and attack America. Since the start of the year, as the Chinese newcomers have been trying to find their footing in the US, Trump has alluded to fighting-age or military-age Chinese men at least 6 times and suggested at least twice that they were forming a migrant army. It's a talking point that is being amplified in conservative media and on social platforms. During a campaign rally in Pennsylvania last month, Trump said, "They're coming in from China, about 32,000 over the last few months, and they're all military age and they're mostly men. And it sounds to me like they're trying to build a little army in our country. Is that what they're trying to do?" As Trump and others exploit a surge in Chinese border crossings and real concerns about China's geopolitical threat to further their political aims, Asian advocacy organizations worry the rhetoric could encourage further harassment and violence towards the Asian community. Asian people in the United States already experienced a spike in hate incidents fueled by xenophobic rhetoric during the COVID pandemic. Cynthia Choi, co-founder of the Stop Hate and co-executive director of Chinese for Affirmative Action, says Trump's dehumanizing rhetoric and blatant attacks against immigrant communities will without question only fuel more hate against not only Chinese immigrants but all Asian Americans in the United States. In the midst of an already inflamed political climate and election year, we know all too well how harmful such rhetoric can be. Greg Orton, National Director of the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, says many Asian American communities remain gripped by fear and that some Asians still feel uncomfortable about taking public transportation. Immigrants who spoke to the media in Flushing, a densely populated Chinese cultural enclave in Queens, said they came to the US to escape poverty and financial losses from China's strict lockdown during the pandemic or to escape the threat of imprisonment in a repressive society where they could not speak or exercise their religion freely. Many said they continue to struggle to get by. Life in the US is not what they had imagined. Since late 2022, when China's 3-year COVID-19 lockdown began to lift, the US has seen a sharp rise in the number of Chinese migrants. In 2023, US authorities arrested more than 37,000 Chinese nationals at the US-Mexico border. That's more than 10 times the previous year's number. In December alone, border officials arrested close to 6,000 Chinese nationals on the southern border, a record monthly high before the number trended down during the first 3 months of the year. The US and China just recently began cooperating again to deport Chinese immigrants who were in the country illegally. Yet, with tens of thousands of Chinese newcomers who've crossed into the US illegally, there has been no evidence that they've tried to mount a military force or training network, as Trump and some of his Republicans are now alleging. All right, our next story is on India-Maldives ties. Well, Maldives Foreign Minister Musa Zamir today hailed the Indian government for extending a budget support of $50 million to the island nation amid downturn in bilateral relations between the two countries since pro-China Mohammad Muizzu took over as president late last year. Zamir wrote on the social media, "I thank Dr. S. Jaishankar and the Government of India for extending vital budgetary support to the Maldives with the rollover of $50 million Treasury bill. This is a true gesture of goodwill, which signifies the long-standing friendship between Maldives and India." Zamir visited India from the 8th to the 10th of May on his very first bilateral official visit to the country. The Maldives government's foreign office said India's budgetary support was in the form of a rollover of $50 million Treasury bill for an additional year through the State Bank of India in Male, starting today, the 13th of May. 2024. The Maldives government said it's highly appreciative of the generous support that the Government of India has been providing to the Maldives in the form of budgetary support. However, just last week, the Maldives Foreign Minister had said that 76 Indian military personnel were replaced by civilian employees of the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, which manufactured the 2 helicopters gifted to the Maldives by India. Relations between the two countries came under severe strain in view of President Muizzu insisting on the withdrawal of Indian military personnel who were operating 3 military platforms in the island nation. And now the Maldives military has said it still does not have pilots capable of operating these 3 aircraft donated by India. Defence Minister Ghassan Momoon has acknowledged days after 76 Indian defence personnel left the country at the instance of the President. Ghassan Momoon made the remarks at a press conference on Saturday to brief the media about the withdrawal of Indian soldiers stationed in the Maldives to operate 2 helicopters and a Dornier aircraft and their replacement with civilians from India. Momoon said there were no Maldivian soldiers with the Maldivian National Defence Force who can operate the 3 aircraft donated by the Indian military, despite some soldiers who began training to fly them under agreements formed by previous governments. The minister said, as it was the training that required passing various stages, our soldiers had not reached completion due to various reasons. Therefore, there aren't any people in our force at the moment who are licensed or fully operational to fly the 3 aircraft. All right, now news on India-Pakistan ties. In the midst of escalating tensions in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar today reiterated India's unwavering stance on the region, emphasizing that Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or POK, has, is and will always be an integral part of India. His comments come at a critical juncture as protests against high prices of essential commodities and government policies have gripped the disputed territory. During a press interaction, Dr. Jaishankar outlined the achievements of the Modi government, underscoring India's clear position on POK. He referenced a parliament resolution affirming POK as part of India, emphasizing the government's intention to end the illegal occupation and merge it back with India. Jaishankar stated, and I quote, "The Modi government is clear, and there's also a parliament resolution that Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is part of India. It was always a part of India and it will always remain a part of India. It's our intention that one day we will end the illegal occupation of POK and merge it back with India." The opposition's thoughts on this are in the opposite direction. Be it Farooq Saab or Manishankar Ayya, they are so scared of Pakistan's nuclear weapons that they think we should not talk about POK. Pakistan-occupied Kashmir has been engulfed in unrest, as we mentioned, as protests against skyrocketing prices of wheat flour, inflated electricity bills and taxes have intensified. The situation reached a boiling pot boiling point, I beg your pardon, recently, with clashes between security forces and protesters resulting in casualties and injuries. A complete strike has paralyzed the region, with markets, trade centers and educational institutes shuttered and transport suspended. The Jammu and Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee, representing various segments of society, has been at the forefront of the protest, demanding fair pricing of electricity, subsidized wheat flour and an end to privilege enjoyed by the elite. Despite negotiations with the government, talks have reached an impasse, prompting the JAAC to announce a long march to Muzaffarabad, the capital of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The protesters have resorted to sit-ins and road blockades, amplifying pressure on the government. In response, authorities have deployed heavy contingents of police and called in the rangers to quell the unrest. However, the situation remains tense, with incidents of violence and arrests reported. In light of the escalating crisis, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has convened a high-level meeting to, he says, address the grievances of the protesters. He's emphasized the need for dialogue and peaceful resolution of the issues, urging all parties to refrain from violence.
आजकल थोड़ी बहुत बातें पीओके पे भी चल रही हैं, वहाँ कुछ आपने देखा होगा कि कुछ घटनाएं भी हो रही हैं। अब मोदी सरकार जो है, हमारा मत इस पे बहुत स्पष्ट है। पार्लियामेंट का रेजोल्यूशन है, हम बहुत क्लियर हैं कि पीओके जो है भारत का अंग है। इट इज पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, इट वाज ऑलवेज पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, इट विल बी पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया। और हमारा ये जरूर इरादा है कि एक दिन हम पीओके को जो है वहाँ का इलीगल ऑक्यूपेशन जो है उसको हम खत्म करेंगे और पीओके जो है भारत के साथ वापस जुड़ जाएगा।
Our next story is from Japan, and it may surprise you. As Japan embarks on a major military build-up, it is struggling to fill its ranks with the women that its forces need, and its policymakers have pledged to recruit. Following a wave of sexual harassment cases, the number of women applying to join the Self-Defense Forces, or SDF, decreased by 12% in the year ending March 2023, after several years of steady growth. Some victims have said an entrenched culture of harassment could deter women from signing up. But 9 months after the Defence Ministry pledged to take drastic measures, it has no plans to take action on a key recommendation issued by an independent panel of experts implementing a national system for reviewing anti-harassment training standards, according to 2 ministry officials who are responsible for the training. The government-appointed panel had identified in a report published in August last year that the military's superficial harassment education, which made only limited mention of sexual harassment and a lack of centralized oversight of such training, were contributing factors to cultural problems within the institution. The head of the panel, Makoto Tadaki, said some training sessions were at odds with the gravity of the situation. A servicewoman who is suing the government over an alleged sexual harassment incident said in an interview that the education she received over the past 10 years was quite ineffective. Calls to root out harassment and increase the number of servicewomen come as aging Japan faces rising threats from China, North Korea and Russia, and navigates the burdensome legacy of its wartime past. Women make up just 9% of military personnel in Japan compared to 17% in the US, Tokyo's key security ally. The SDF said in an emailed response that harassment must never be allowed as it destroys mutual trust between service members and undermines their strength. The ministry said it had hosted harassment prevention lectures by external experts since 2023, made sessions more discussion-based and planned to invite specialists to review its training this year. After former soldier Rina Gunoi went public with allegations of sexual assault in 2022, the Defence Ministry conducted a survey that year which uncovered more than 170 alleged sexual harassment incidents in Japan's SDF. Another alleged victim was an Okinawa-based servicewoman who accused a senior of making lewd remarks towards her in 2013. She was then publicly named in harassing training materials distributed to her colleagues in 2014. The alleged perpetrator was not identified in the same material. The Defence Ministry offers an annual online module on gender harassment. It also provides training materials to officers for in-person sessions, but doesn't offer training on delivering harassment education and doesn't track how or when the officers carry out harassment training. according to the 2 defense officials who were interviewed. The 6 experts concluded in their review that existing training amounted to generic, superficial statements that were not effective in helping people apply the training in the real world. All right, let's now turn our attention to Afghanistan, which has been wrecked by floods in recent days. Flash floods in the country caused by unusually heavy seasonal rain have claimed the lives of hundreds of people. Amid the crisis, several international aid groups have provided relief material, including medicines and other supplies. The World Health Organization says it has delivered 7 tons of medicines and emergency kits. The death toll from flooding in Afghanistan has now crossed 300. The floods in Afghanistan have severely impacted 5 districts in the Baghlan region. Aid group Save the Children has sent a clinic on wheels with mobile health and child protection teams to support children and their families there.
Hundreds of people have been killed and more than 1,600 injured in flash flooding in northern Afghanistan, authorities said on Sunday. The Taliban-run refugee ministry says thousands of homes have been damaged and livestock wiped out following heavy rain. Meanwhile, aid groups warn of widening havoc as healthcare facilities and vital infrastructure have also been damaged. For those who have survived, like Mohammed Yaqub, their focus is burying the dead.
The flash floods destroyed all our houses. I lost 13 members of my family, including women and children. So many livestock have been destroyed as well.
But moving forward isn't simple, and people are struggling to cope.
We have no food, no drinking water, no shelter, no blankets, nothing at all. The floods have destroyed everything. Out of 42 houses, only 2 or 3 houses remain. The floods have destroyed the entire valley.
In a statement, the Taliban's economy minister urged the United Nations and private businesses to provide support for those affected by the flooding. Afghanistan is prone to natural disasters, and the UN considers it one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change. But following the Taliban takeover after foreign forces withdrew in 2021, it's battled a shortfall in aid. That's because development aid that formed the backbone of government finances was cut. This has worsened in subsequent years as foreign governments grapple with competing global crises and growing condemnation of the Taliban's curbs on Afghan women.
And the death toll in floods in Brazil's Rio Grande do Sul state has crossed 140. The Civil Defense Agency says over 125 people are missing, while more than 600,000 have been evacuated. The government announced $2.34 billion in emergency spending to deal with the crisis that has displaced more than 540,000 people in the state out of a population of around 11 million. In 2 weeks of record rainfall that has unleashed flooding and mudslides across the state, almost 450 towns have witnessed dramatic scenes of survivors rescued from flood waters, including in the state capital, Porto Alegre, where the Gwadar River burst its banks, inundating more than half of the city. Downpours on the 29th of April continued on Sunday, raising hopes of floodwaters receding and raising the number of the displaced to over 620,000. The National Institute of Meteorology has forecast more heavy rains through Monday in Brazil's southernmost state, which borders on Argentina and Uruguay. From Afghanistan and Brazil floods, let's now turn our attention to a volcanic eruption in Indonesia. Mount Ibu, a volcano in Indonesia's North Maluku province, erupted today, spewing thick grey ash and dark clouds 5,000 meters into the sky for at least 5 minutes. The volcanic earthquakes are still intense, so there is a potential for a future eruption. That's what the chief of the Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation has said. After an eruption on Friday, the center raised the alert level for the volcano from 2 to 3, the second highest level, which widens the radius of the area which should be vacated. Local authorities have prepared evacuation tents, but no evacuation order has been reported yet. Officials advised residents and tourists not to conduct any activities within 5 kilometers of Mount Ibu's crater. More than 13,000 people live within that 5-kilometer radius of the northern side of the crater. The 1,325-meter volcano is on the northwest coast of the remote island of Halmahera. Indonesia, an archipelago of 270 million people, has 120 active volcanoes. It's prone to volcanic activity because it sits along the Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped series of seismic fault lines around the Pacific Ocean. And as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens, let's bring you a story that should gladden your hearts. The Northern Lights made a stunning appearance across the world over the weekend after the most powerful solar storm in more than 2 decades struck Earth. The colourful display, also known as the Aurora Borealis, was seen in most parts of Europe. The Northern Lights also illuminated the night sky over some parts of the United States, Canada and Australia. The spectacular celestial light shows were attributed to an extreme geomagnetic storm that struck Earth. Authorities had also notified satellite operators, airlines and the power grid to take precautionary steps for potential disruptions caused by changes to Earth's magnetic field. Social media too was lit up, with many users posting their pictures of auroras. The Northern Lights were visible across Russia, particularly in the Moscow region, as well as in Saratov and Voronezh, and extending into southern Siberia as well. The Northern Lights are usually visible in regions located closer to the Earth's magnetic poles like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland and Alaska. Clearly, this was quite a celestial treat for almost the entire world. Well, that's a wrap on Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow.
America, there is an inheritance tax. In India, you don't have that.
कांग्रेस की लूट जिंदगी के साथ भी और जिंदगी के बाद भी.
Our manifesto combines ideology